Welcome back to the channel, guys. As requested by the majority of the people in the Facebook post, here is the extreme low light video test. There are more comparison videos coming up, so stay tuned to the channel. Notice the framing between these two very comparable systems in terms of field of view and bokeh. It is not as simple as we thought. I will discuss more on this in a future video. For this test, shutter speed is the key. First of all, I request anybody who's watching this video to thank my wife, because without her, this video wouldn't be possible. She has been an exceptional model, waiting patiently and acting in front of the camera so that I can make this comparison video for you guys who wanted to compare these two cameras at low light performance. So you guys owe a thanks to my wife. If you want to support our channel, please check out our channel videos and please watch them from start to end. That would be a great help for us to be motivated to make such content in the future. Thank you. I am testing the high ISO performance for proper exposures between the A6700 and the A7Cii, recording 4K 30 frames per second on both these cameras, as that is the maximum allowable frame rate by these cameras without a crop and with maximum image quality. While you're watching the video, pay attention to the autofocus box on the bottom left screen, as at very low exposures the autofocus struggles. Autofocus functions properly from the ISO 800 in the Sony A6700, while it functions properly from ISO 400 in the A7Cii. I'm honestly blown away by the fact that the Sony A6700 footage at ISO 12800 is very usable for the kind of content I make. I'm showing here, if you were to increase the exposure in post, how noisy they get. It's a very good understanding of how bad the image falls apart even with a very minimal increase in exposure in post. One more thing to note is that the ISO, if you're using the manual mode, can only reach up to 6400 in Sony A6700, while it can reach up to 12800 in Sony A7Cii. But if you were to use auto mode, you get to use the maximum allowable ISO by increasing the shutter speed or reducing the exposure. I never expected even to think that I would be using the maximum ISO possible by these two cameras. Even at the ISO 25600, the Sony A6700 produces amazing image with just the grain from the ISO noise. If I were to use the noise reduction, the image really cleans up really fast, and yeah, it's pretty good looking in my opinion. There is definitely a color shift from the ISO 25600 to 32000, but I wouldn't say the image is totally unusable. For documentary purpose, if you need to get the footage, yes, it will be really helpful for you, and that's something important. If you are good at using the noise reduction for videos, you will be able to use the footages shot at ISO 32000 from the Sony A6700. This is something that's blowing my mind right now. It is no surprise that the Sony A7Cii is performing exceptionally even at the ISO 12800. It is as clean as the images using the Sony A6700 at 1600 ISO. I'm really mind blown by the performance of the Sony A7Cii, and I don't think I would ever need Sony A7S III. You shouldn't shoot at a very low light situations without exposing the subject, but if you were in a pinch, you would definitely get away with either of these cameras. But Sony A7Cii performs really better, and for these purposes, I really find Sony A7Cii to be more useful than the Sony A6700. But this is not the end of the story. More comparisons are gonna come up in this channel, so stay tuned, and I will discuss why I would still choose A6700 over A7Cii for everything else. This may be your reference point, but this is something to keep in mind. So when it comes to overheating, when I was shooting these two comparison videos, A6700 did not even show the overheating warning, but Sony A7Cii showed up the overheating warning right in the middle of the video. And also I find that the overheating warning came up when we were using the maximum ISO. So maybe since it is pumping up a lot of voltage to the sensor, it might be an issue. If you're using high ISO, it might overheat faster, and I had to restart with a new battery, then it started to work. So yeah, there it goes. Sony A7Cii definitely overheats faster than Sony A6700, if that's something that you want to know. If you want to freeze a frame in photos, definitely you need to have a high shutter speed, and you cannot do that with high ISO. And especially in photos, the image falls apart pretty fast. Just because this is a video, we are getting amazing results in Sony A6700. So definitely A7C II performs really well. Yes, these footages are completely usable in my opinion. ISO 12000 on the Sony A7C II is totally usable. I wouldn't say it is noise free, but the noise is very bearable, as equivalent to ISO 1600 in Sony A6700. So you can see how good the ISO performance is. When it comes to low light photos and videos, I would say that Sony A6700 is definitely subpar because of the limitation of shutter speed. If low light is a concern for you, and if you are comfortable filming at 4K 30 frames per second, A7C II is the way to go. If that's not your only concern, please stay tuned to this channel because I'm making a full comparison video between these two cameras, so wait for it. The bottom line is, if you're exposing for the subject, you need to use the correct shutter speed. In that case, for the same shutter speed, even with the brightest autofocus lens for the system, APS-C cameras can only fetch you noisy videos, while the full-frame camera may produce less noisy videos, which is evident from these tests. But for me, I'm totally happy with the video quality of the Sony A6700, even at the ISO 12800. I just need to use a bit of noise reduction.